allegations of antitrust behavior from SAP, the huge project management mistake you may be making, and how to get your ERP modernization in tune. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover here in episode 242 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Transformation Ground Control. Thank you for joining today. This is the tech agnostic podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, including people, process, technology, and strategy aspects of change. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent and tech agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And joining me, as always, is Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Excited for today's show. We've got a great set of topics to cover here today. We're going to start off with some social media questions. We'll get into some newsworthy topics, including the EU's antitrust investigation into SAP and their related support and maintenance and pricing activities. We'll also get into data management for ERP. And then later in the show, we're going to have a couple of guests, one from Acumatica and the other from Eastman Music Company, who are going to be on talking about a real life case study of how they were able to get their ERP modernization in tune. And the reason we're talking about getting it in tune, it's a play on words because it's a music company that recently implemented ERP. So we'll have a chat with them later to learn some of their lessons from their recent ERP implementation. And then later in the show, we'll talk about the huge project management mistake that you may be making on your digital transformation. So we've got a lot to cover here today. But before we jump into some of our guests and other topics here today, what are some of the social media questions we've received recently, Darian?
Yeah, so this first question today is about S4HANA. So it says, is moving from ECC to S4HANA really about chasing height, or is it a necessary step to stay competitive as ERP shifts towards cloud, AI, and modern user experiences?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and one I'm torn on, honestly, because the technologist in me, the consultant in me, the person that should be on the forefront, bleeding edge of all technology in me, would say, yeah, you need to move to S4HANA just to modernize your systems and to get the latest and greatest and get to the cloud, get AI, they offer Joule and a bunch of other AI capabilities. They're only available in S4HANA cloud. So that part of me would say, yeah, it probably is a good idea to move to S4HANA. But the skeptic in me and the realist in me understands that most organizations don't have tons of unlimited resources and time and money to implement S4HANA. And a lot of them, quite frankly, aren't prepared to take on the risk because those are very risky endeavors. One of the biggest problems we see with the migration or the journey from ECC to S4HANA is ECC for a lot of organizations was a heavily customized environment. It was a good tool that allowed them to not only have a full-blown ERP system that was at the time sort of the gold standard of ERP systems, but it also allowed them to customize the software very heavily. For better or for worse, they could change the software to fit their business needs and their unique competitive advantages. But those same organizations now, when they go to switch to S4HANA, find that, okay, S4HANA has some great capabilities and some new things we don't have now, but we're also losing a lot because all that customization we spent years and years fine-tuning and investing in, we're losing that now. And now we're assuming or hoping that S4HANA gives us something better. And in many cases, organizations find that that's a very painful process because in many cases, for every feature they're getting in S4HANA, they're losing features that they had built and taken all this time to build their own intellectual property around. And so, I think we all have to be realistic and objective and just look at the cost benefit of, does it make sense? And we're seeing a staggering number of our own clients that are SAP customers. We're seeing a staggering number of them say, you know what, we're not going to do it. We're not going to move to S4HANA. we're going to do something more incremental. We're going to do something that's more risk adjusted for our culture and for what we're comfortable with. We're not going to go double down on SAP right now, but instead they're going and looking at what their full suite of options are. And in some cases, they're considering third-party support maintenance options. In some cases, they're considering AI tools outside of SAP that they can bolt on to SAP or use in the same universe as ECC. So there's a lot of different options you have available. You don't have to go to S/4HANA. I mean, again, the technologist in me would say, let's be on the latest and greatest, take advantage of all this R&D and all the capabilities SAP is investing in. But the only person that can decide if that makes sense for your business is you as an organization, if that makes sense for you and your risk tolerance and your budget and your tolerance for pain and chaos and risk and all that stuff. Only you can decide that. And if it turns out that you're not on the same page with what SAP wants you to do, then don't do it. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's not the end of the world if you're a little behind on technology. You don't have to be the latest and greatest. If you manufacture widgets or do anything other than something that's super high tech, there's no need for you to be on the latest and greatest. You can find other systems that give you more incremental capabilities and bigger improvements, potentially at a lower cost and lower risk. So I think just being objective about it, being realistic, it's easy for us as outsiders to say, yeah, invest heavily in new technology or else they're going to be left behind. You might get left behind. We see plenty of companies that get left behind because they fail massively in their upgrade from ECC to S/4HANA. And that's even worse. That's much worse than being quote unquote left behind on-prem, with your old ECC system. That's not as bad of a thing as some would make it out to be. So that's my 2 cents on the whole thing.
Yeah, those are some great points. Our next question today is, will platforms like OneStream become the new gold standard by letting enterprises keep niche ERPs for transactions while consolidating everything into a single corporate book of record?
And OneStream is a fascinating tool just because it does enable, or it allows what you just said, which is that ability to keep your legacy systems and that ability to operate with multiple technology environments, which is particularly helpful for organizations that are global, that have grown through mergers and acquisitions, and any other organization that has multiple systems for whatever reason. It can be a good way to give you that financial consolidation and visibility into your operations in a way that doesn't necessarily require you to rip out your back office systems. And so I'm always a fan of looking at options, and OneStream for a lot of organizations is a good, call it a Band-Aid option. It's not, maybe it's not going to completely modernize your ERP tech stack, but it is providing you some capabilities that maybe you don't have now. And that's okay. If you can make an incremental improvement with a OneStream, get the financial consolidation reporting capabilities you need, reduce your period end close time, get better financials, spend less time and money on the accounting and finance processes. I mean, that could be a huge win for a lot of organizations, especially in this M&A rich environment that we're in right now, where a lot of companies are merging, a lot of companies are out there acquiring other companies. OneStream can be a good way, especially for private equity firms and other acquirers of businesses, to get immediate or relatively immediate visibility into the global operations.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting questions today, but we're going to switch gears here and get into our first newsworthy topic of the day, which is about data management. So this article talks about how data management has become a core IT principle or discipline, encompassing how organizations ingest, organize, process, store, secure, and govern data across their enterprise systems. While often led by data architects or administrators, it increasingly engages nearly every IT function. So the key takeaways from this article include types of data management. So there's 7 different approaches that are central today. It's architecture, modeling, pipelines, cataloging, integration, governance, and security. And then it goes over the best practices, so having clear goals, governance frameworks, quality assurance, lifecycle management, integration, and master data management are essential for effective execution. The challenges with this can include how organizations struggle with data silos, so complexity of integrating multiple systems, complex requirements, and evolving cyber risks. And then the shift that's happening is data is no longer an IT afterthought. It's a critical enterprise asset requiring intentional company-wide strategies. So Eric, with all of this, what are your overall thoughts, and how does poor data management show up in ERP and digital transformation failures?
Data management has been an Achilles heel of digital transformations for a long time. It's nothing new. I think it's just exasperated by and underscored by artificial intelligence. Now with the robust tool sets we have, even going back to predictive analytics and business intelligence and now artificial intelligence, all of those technologies are things that are very data hungry. They need data and they need good data. And the dirtier the data is and the less accurate the data is, the more inaccurate the technology is, and the more people have a tendency to blame the technology for their woes. When in reality, a lot of times the system's fine. Yes, the system's giving you crappy information or crappy results, but it's because you gave it crappy inputs. And so that's the sort of thing that organizations have struggled with for a long time. But now, with AI, I think it just makes it worse, or it magnifies the problem, because now if you get these AI hallucinations, they're not even hallucinations technically, because they're doing what they're meant to do. It's just they're taking the wrong data and you're training the AI models the wrong way. And so it can actually create a lot of problems if you don't have that. And so that's why it's so important to invest that time and money to get the data right. And so many organizations really overlook this pretty significantly. And I think they think that by hiring a software vendor and a system integrator or an implementation technical partner, that those partners are just going to handle the data aspect for them. But typically, I'd say 99% of the time, in the proposals and statements of work and the contracts that you have from your vendors, your outside vendors, is typically they're going to say, yeah, we'll move the data over for you, but we're counting on you to clean it, to get it ready, to scrub it, to maybe even map it to the new data fields in the new system. And once you've done that, sure, we'll bring it over. We've got the migration tools to move the data into the new system. But that one little caveat of we assume you're going to clean it, you're going to map it. I mean, that's a huge undertaking. That it might be just one bulleted line item assumption on your statement of work or your contract, but that can have huge ramifications for your project, especially when it comes to your time and budget. Because if you get to let's just say you get to user acceptance testing and you get to the heavy duty testing phases of the project late in the project, and then you realize, wait a minute, we need data in here to actually test the system, and we want to try to test all of our data in the new system, then it gets exposed at that point late in the project that your data kind of sucks. The data is not accurate. And now you've got a delay on your hands where now you've got to get the data into the system. Or if you stay on track and decide, well, I'm not going to delay the project, I'll just figure out the data thing in post-production after we go live. That's even worse, because now you've got a new system that isn't working the way you need it to because the data and the inputs aren't right. So that's part one. Part two of all this too is, let's just say you do all that stuff right. You get the data clean, you map it, you get it into the new system, it works great, but then you don't train people and people don't understand how to keep the data clean. And I'm not saying people are going in and intentionally screwing up all your data. That's not it. Typically it's just because there's a broken business process, or they don't understand how they should be capturing data. And so unintentionally your employees start corrupting all the data that you just cleaned up. And so you mentioned data governance, and that's where data governance comes in, where you've got to have new processes in place and new ways of tightening down, who can go in and change, for example, a customer record or a customer master. So you don't want someone going in and creating duplicates of the same customer just because they can't find the initial one. So they go create a new one, and then they create a sales order against that new customer that's actually an existing customer. And now you've got a silo, within the same customer base on your data set, just as a simple example. So all that is training related. It's business process definition. And then there's data governance behind that. So you really want to think through what's this post go live world going to look like in terms of data management to make sure we keep it all on track.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more question with this. I know you kind of touched on it, but should enterprises treat data management as like its own transformation program rather than just a subset of the IT division? And how would they go about treating it, if so, as their own program?
My answer would be yes to that. If you've got your technology implementation, let's just say you're implementing a new ERP system or CRM or HR or supply chain management, whatever it is, you're implementing some new technology. That's one work stream. And then another important work stream that I would call out as a separate work stream underneath the overall program is what you're saying, which is the data management. I would tie to that, integration, architecture, that whole bucket of stuff is oftentimes its own technical work stream that's different from the technology you're implementing. So that would include not just data management, but it would include how are you going to integrate these new systems to your legacy systems, either temporarily or permanently, depending on which systems you're keeping or getting rid of. You also want to look at the overall architecture. How are all of our systems going to fit together? And then, of course, how is data going to fit within the overall program? And that includes, where's the data going to reside? Because you might have multiple data sources you're trying to draw from, or you might have different systems that are tracking different pieces of information, but you want that information to integrate to the other systems. So all that stuff has to be clear because it'll create a technical mess, kind of a spaghetti bowl of stuff happening that's not well thought out or planned if you don't focus on that data architecture and integration work stream. So, and then totally out of scope of your question, but then you'd have other work streams too, like your change management, your business process improvement, all the other stuff that goes into making a project successful that's not directly related to the software itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting stuff on that. But we're going to switch over to our next newsworthy article of the day, which actually is super interesting here. So it's the European Commission has opened a formal antitrust investigation into SAP's ERP support and maintenance services. So regulators are examining whether SAP restricts customer choice and stifles competition from third-party vendors like Rimini Street or others that could be listed there as well. So the support deadlines, SAP plans to end standard support for ECC and Business Suite 7 in 2027, with only costly extended support options available through 2030 and limited maintenance through 2033. The third-party barriers EU officials suspect SAP's practice makes it more difficult for independent providers to offer cheaper ERP support alternatives. So the customer risk here is enterprises could face higher support costs and fewer options during a critical ERP migration period. This case underscores rising scrutiny of how dominant ERP vendors monetize legacy platforms while pushing cloud migrations. The outcomes could influence global regulatory attitudes towards ERP support and software maintenance monopolies. So this is a super interesting case happening right now. Eric, how does this investigation compare to past antitrust cases in the ERP space?
I don't know that there are any precedents set for the ERP space in particular. I'm not an attorney. There might be cases out there I'm not aware of. I know there was Rimini Street and Oracle, I believe it was, had a legal battle, a decade ago, but it wasn't over. It wasn't over. Actually, it was over something similar. It was because Rimini Street. I may have these facts wrong, but I'll give you the general gist of it. Even if the parties I'm naming are wrong, the general gist is true, which is there was a legal case. I think it was Rimini Street. I want to say there was another firm called Tomorrow Now, or I can't remember the name of it, but I don't think they're around anymore. And then Oracle were involved because Oracle was suing Rimini Street, I believe, because they thought that Rimini Street was stealing intellectual property to be able to support, to provide that third-party support and maintenance to customers that wanted that third-party support. I believe Oracle lost that case, and Rimini Street is obviously Rimini Street is still around. They're still providing third-party support, and I know that case is settled. I would go Google it. Do not count on my memory here because I know I have some facts wrong here. But the general gist is there was litigation around third-party support a while back, but I believe this is the first time where a vendor has been accused of antitrust behavior. It reminds me a lot of the Google and Microsoft cases. Like both Google and Microsoft have had issues with the EU and the antitrust division of the European Commission in the past, and they've had to settle some of those litigation. And I think, honestly, the Google and Microsoft cases were a big deal because it wasn't ERP, but it was consumer facing. So it was consumers that were being harmed in this case. So the government, I think, was a little bit more aggressive in that case. And as government regulatory bodies tend to be, they tend to regulate more when it's business to consumer. In this case, we're talking about business to business, but I still think SAP's behavior is a lot like Google and Microsoft. In fact, I would argue it's worse. I think SAP, this is just my personal opinion, not a legal opinion, but in my opinion, I think SAP acts like a monopoly, and I think they wish they had a monopoly, and I think they behave like a monopoly in many cases. And they use their size and scale to disadvantage third-party providers. I think they use their size and scale to disadvantage customers. And quite honestly, I think it's catching up to them. And this is something I actually have a video coming out that I already filmed before this news broke. It'll be released here in the next few days. But it's a video about how I'm comparing SAP to BlackBerry and Blockbuster Video. as two obsolete companies that not because they missed a technological trend necessarily, although they did. It was more about the hubris and arrogance that those two companies both had that led to their demise. And I think the same thing is going to happen to SAP. I think eventually they will no longer be relevant to the tier one ERP conversation. People, I know I get criticized a lot for saying that, but I just don't think they can sustain their current model. We see so many pissed off customers right now with SAP. People are not happy with SAP. SAP may think they're winning because they are forcing enough people to switch over to S4HANA, and financially they're doing really well. The stock price has been doing well. They're doing all the things they need to be doing strategically, but they are pissing off a lot of customers and they're not helping themselves. And there's just too many startups and too many other alternatives out there. And I think the whole ERP category is at risk, but I think SAP probably has the most to lose right now by some of the behavior. So that's not a legal opinion, of course, but I'm not at all surprised. And honestly, I'm glad that the government is investigating, because I think it's been a long time coming, especially ever since this forced migration from ECC to S4HANA. I mean, when you hold the world's largest organizations hostage and essentially say, we're going to extort you and force you to move over, but we're not really forcing you. You can do whatever you want. You just can't get support from us or other people if you don't continue with your migration to S4HANA. To me, that's extortion. So you can call it what you want, but in my opinion, that's extortion, and the government should be looking into this. And if anything, just to apply some pressure and get them to rethink their business practices, which, again, in my opinion, are highly unethical at best.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super interesting. But for immediate implications for CIOs, what should they do if they're currently running ECC or Business Suite 7? Obviously, they could look into third party, but is there any other options?
I mean, I would keep it simple and do what you need to do. I mean, forget SAP for a minute, forget Remaster, forget all these third parties telling you should or shouldn't do what you need to do. Just do what you need to do and look at your options and be objective about it. Ask the hard questions. Do we really need to be on S4HANA? Do we really need support and maintenance from SAP? Could we go to Remaster? Do we really need to upgrade S4HANA? Maybe we just stick with ECC. Is that the end of the world? Probably not. SAP will tell you it's the end of the world because they're cutting off maintenance, and ECC will someday be completely obsolete. You won't be able to find resources that can support ECC. That might be true in 20 years from now, but for the next 5 or 10 years, it's not the end of the world if you stay at ECC. ECC was a good platform. It lasted a long time. A lot of organizations are still getting a ton of value out of it. So if it's not broke, then why would you fix it? You may have bigger fish to fry as an organization. So I would say treat it like any other capital investment and look at, where am I going to get the most ROI? If it's from an S4HANA migration and I'm sure I'm going to get that ROI, then sure, maybe you want to do it. But if you can't justify the ROI, which, spoiler alert, most of our clients cannot justify, it's almost impossible to justify an upgrade for a lot of these clients, other than SAP's forcing me to, or there's some non-quantifiable metric that they're using. But if you just look objectively, straight numbers, it is really hard to justify a migration from ECC to S4HANA, especially if ECC is working well for you, it's stable, you're able to scale with it and grow with it. I mean, why would you do it? I mean, you just have to ask yourself that question. So be objective, look at your options, ask the hard questions. That would be my advice.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super interesting. We'll have to keep track of kind of how this case develops in the EU.
I hate to say this and admit it on the air, but I will admit it. I don't know that I've ever been more excited for some legal action by the government, because I think I've been waiting for about at least 5 years for someone to step in and do something. And I'm not a fan of government regulation, by the way. I'm more of a libertarian, keep the government out of my business sort of person. But when big businesses get this crazy, sometimes I think you need someone to step in and call a timeout. So we'll see what happens, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing those newsworthy topics. As always, those are great case studies to learn from and important trends to stay on top of. We've got a lot more to cover. In fact, we're going to take a quick break and bring back a couple of guests. We're going to bring on a couple of guests, one from Acumatica and one, it's actually the chief revenue officer of Acumatica. And then we're going to bring on one of Acumatica's customers, which is Eastman Kodak. Or I'm sorry, not Eastman Kodak. Talking about obsolete companies. That company no longer, I don't think they exist anymore. Eastman Music Company, not Eastman Kodak. Eastman Music Company is going to be on here in just a moment, and they're going to talk about lessons from their implementation. We'll have their vice president of operations, who was responsible for the project, the ERP implementation. We'll talk about some of the lessons learned and see what takeaways we have there. And then later in the show, we'll talk about the huge project management mistake that you may be making that you're not aware of. So we've got a lot more to cover. Be sure to stick around. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I met her in a club down in Old Soho, where you drink champagne and it tastes like Coca-Cola.
One of the biggest problems I see in digital transformations is companies trying to implement or use systems that just can't keep up with their growth. A lot of times they're trying to get value out of systems that can't scale, doesn't provide the information they need, it creates more inefficiencies than it solves. And if that's the case for you, it's probably time to consider and look at what your other options are. Acumatica is an ERP system that we've seen work well with a lot of organizations, especially those that are looking for something that's scalable, industry specific, and gives you more predictable pricing. And that last part's really important because so many software providers out there have unpredictable pricing and kicker clauses and ways to escalate the cost to you without necessarily guaranteeing value. So if that sounds like something that'd be of interest to you, you might want to check out Acumatica. One of the things I like about this system is that they provide unlimited user pricing. So you don't get dinged, you don't have to pay more just because you added to your headcount and you continue to grow as a company. You have unlimited users you can have use the software, which is good for adoption too, because now you're not having to pay more for having more people use the system. And another thing I like about Acumatica is they, like most software vendors, are investing in AI, but they're investing in AI in a very practical way. It's not just a buzzword. It's not just a checkbox to say they have AI. They actually have some really good use cases of how a lot of mid-sized organizations are using AI. If you decide that you want to learn more, check the link below, because if you use that link, you can not only learn more about the product, but if you do decide that Acumatica is right for you, being a viewer of this show, you'll save 15% on your subscription. So be sure to check that out.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 242. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and I'm here with Darian Chwialkowski. And I love having case studies on this show, real-life case studies that we can dive into, ask real-life clients what they've been through, what they've experienced, what they would do different after their digital transformations. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to bring on a couple of guests. One is Ralph, who's the VP of operations at a company called Eastman Music Company. And he recently went through a journey with his organization to implement Acumatica to upgrade their ERP system. And we're also going to have the Chief Revenue Officer, Sanket from Acumatica, join us for this discussion as well. So thanks for being here, guys. And Ralph, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, how you got to Eastman and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I am a trained musician. That's what I went to college for. I'm a saxophonist. I still consider myself a saxophonist. I do what I can to keep playing my instrument. If I turned the camera around, you'd see a lot of saxophones in my office as part of R&D of making the instruments. But my role has changed a lot. I was hired as a customer service rep back in 2008. So I've been with the company for quite a while. And I've worked my way up to vice president of operations. Along the way, initially just being someone who was introduced to the concept of ERP at all, working here for the first time to managing our current ERP system, which we moved to Acumatica. We're just 1 month shy of 3 years of go live for our first set of companies. So it's been quite a journey. That first prep in 2002 to switch to Acumatica and get prep for the transition, and then going live. And then since then, we're now operating in 6 countries, 4 continents, through 2 languages, and we've scaled up to 19 actual financial entities in Acumatica to manage our company worldwide. So it's been quite a journey to going from our legacy system to where we are today.
Yeah, and I can't wait to get into it. Like what exactly the journey has been, and what some of the challenges were. So we'll ask you a ton of hold all those thoughts, because I've got a lot of questions for you.
Okay,
a little bit about that. And then Sanket, you're from Chief Revenue Officer at Acumatica. Tell us about your background and journey.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So I'm a drummer, but I'm so just to start off with the musical piece, but I wouldn't say I'm anywhere close to how good Ralph is on us from a saxophone, but I am in the market for new drums. But I've been at Acumatica for almost 5 years now. Live in where our headquarters are, which is just outside of Seattle in Bellevue, Washington. Spent, a lot of time in the software business, spent 14 years at Microsoft in various roles. But, Acumatica is a cloud ERP company. We sell ERP to small and medium businesses around the world. We have over 10,000 customers. We focus on very specific industries like distribution, manufacturing, retail, professional services, and construction. So glad to be here and support the story. But Ralph's story in Eastman Music is quite fantastic. So he'll be the star for sure.
Right. And that's good. And so you've got that musical connection as well. I play bass guitar. I'm not very good, but I do enjoy playing bass. I've got a Fender bass that I love, and I have a couple tattoos that refer to music. But I'm a hack, so I'm not nearly probably as good as either one of you. But I'd love to hear from the audience. A couple questions for the audience as we're doing introductions here. Where in the world are you joining from today? I want to thank the audience for being here. I usually do that up front, and I completely forgot. But thanks to the audience for being here today. Let me know what city and country you're joining from, if you don't mind. We're watching the chat here. We're going to take live questions from you as well. So any questions you have for Ralph or Sanket from a customer or a vendor perspective, please feel free to drop those in the chat at any point. But for now, let me know what city and country you're joining from. Also, let me know what your favorite instrument is. I'd love to hear, just out of curiosity, what's your favorite instrument? Either you play it, or you like to listen to it, or you appreciate it as a listener as well. And I didn't introduce myself. My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, for those that don't know me. So we're an independent tech agnostic consulting firm. We're not affiliated with Acumatica or any other software vendors. So it's a good way for us to just have an objective conversation here. So let's start. You started to go down this path, Ralph. Yeah. And you were talking about how it's been quite a journey. If we back up and look at what led Eastman Kodak to pursue ERP modernization, why was that? Why did why did you decide you needed to modernize your ERP systems, and how did you end up choosing Acumatica?
Yeah, not Eastman Kodak. So not.
Did I say that?
Yeah,
oh man,
no worries. Eastman School of Music, Eastman Kodak, Eastman Music Company.
Yeah.
I'll just clarify for 1 second.
Sorry about that mental block there.
No, you're good. So I started with the company. We were on Mass 90. Oh. And then Mass, yeah. So it got bought, I guess, by Sage, and then we switched to Sage 100, then Sage 100C. And we were way past its capacities years ago, but we're a little scrappy, a little creative, and we were able to patch it together and but it really felt painful to continue on that system, because it was just so antiquated, and it was trying to work in a modernized system. We were trying to move to a cloud-based structure for where our servers are, and they would break every time Microsoft had like a new security update, and all of a sudden we can't log in, right? And we were also growing. When I started, there was 2 companies. There was Eastman Music Company, our factories in China, and then WMS Haynes, which is a flute manufacturer outside of Boston. That was it. Since then, we've grown to quite a few more companies and locations with distribution and manufacturing. So it started also getting really hard to support the growth of the business that way, because we had so many people that needed to log into the system remotely. And when you're dealing with a remote desktop and security rights and all things like that, we don't have an internal IT support staff here. I am the IT support for Eastman, in that I tell people to email someone, not me. I'm not a technical person. I can trick people to think that I'm a technical person, but I really, truly am not. So we have a managed IT service company that does that work for us. And, it was getting hard for them too, really. Just like every other week, it felt like, that's obviously an exaggeration, but it felt that way, that we were having to Band-Aid and patch up our old system. So, and then it got to where I started learning more about how the databases worked. I have some pretty creative and intelligent people over at some of our other factories that have some Microsoft Access background and some other tools that we've been doing to kind of patchwork the system together, and started diving into some of the data and the way it was stored. I don't know that much about data storage, but it was starting to look very hairy. So it was definitely time for us to move to something different. And that just started my path of going online and saying, which ERP system should we, and then all of a sudden you get flooded with all these companies trying to get your business. So you want me to keep going?
Yeah. So you start researching. So you're not a tech guy. You're an operations guy. You came up in the operations, which I find super interesting. And in some ways, I think that gives you an advantage, whether you realized it or not at the time, because you don't get blinded by the tech. I assume you're more focused on how does the business run,
right?
And as an afterthought, almost, how can I get technology to help me? Which I think is the way to do it. But how did that manifest itself into choosing Acumatica? You had all these different options. You probably got bombarded with sales reps after filling out some forms on websites or whatever. So how did you narrow it down and ultimately choose Acumatica?
So ultimately, going back for just a second, it definitely, I don't have a technical background. So I think that's part of the reason we were able to stay on Sage for so long, because I didn't know any better.
Right.
And where our tech guy was like, this is crazy. I can't believe you're still using it. I can still enter orders. It's all right.
We'll power through.
But we made it work, right? It's kind of joking. It was pretty, I think, if looking back, it was impressive what our team was able to do to still work on that system for so long. But yes, we there's a lot of charts and A/B comparison things, and there's actually a lot of resources. If you just I likened it to buying a car, right? You want to buy a car, you put your information in, and then all of a sudden all the dealerships start calling you, and then you could fight them against their price, right? I mean, do that with the ERP system, but it was like all their options, right? Here's what we have, here's what we have, here's what we have. And I'm not completely ignorant to the fact that they exist. So, I mean, I've heard of Oracle and SAP, obviously Sage. And then I learned some other ones, Epicor, Odoo. It was pretty quick to looking blogs and even Reddit and all these, there's online resources. You could pretty quickly whittle down a list between what's popular and what's not, and then the reasons why they're popular. So that was part of it, me just doing some internet research, and then the research.
Google.
Google. And then the rest of it was, talking to some of them, they know what they're doing. And they're like, all right, what are your requirements? What do you mean, what are my requirements? All right, well, I got to do this for manufacturing, this for distribution, this for retail, this for online e-commerce. You start learning the list pretty quickly if you're interfacing with these people that sell ERP systems. You learn the lingo pretty quick. And we had a IT support that we worked with Sage. Obviously, we couldn't work with them anymore. We're moving away. They were also helpful too. They're like, well, whatever you guys look for, you're going to need this. If you stay with Sage, we can help you. If not, best of luck. So I just used the resources we had. I reached out to our IT support company. They obviously work with a lot of companies and their ERP system support. And they were the ones that actually mentioned Acumatica first, because they had another client that was looking at using Acumatica. And then he said, that guy, that operation guy over there is very much like you, pretty hard, pretty understands what he needs, very direct. So you might want to talk to him and see about what Acumatica is about. Okay. And then I started hearing about Acumatica from other things, because to be honest, I didn't hear about I didn't know about Acumatica before. I never heard of the word before looking for an ERP system. I heard of Sage, Oracle, SAP, and some others, that type of thing. So eventually I came up with the list of non-negotiables. It has to be able to do this. It has to be able to do X, Y, Z. A lot of it was, is it a modern system? Because I was coming off of a non-modern system. Acumatica sells themselves as built in the cloud. No one else is. So they probably, in my head, well, it started in a modern infrastructure. So that sounds appealing to a non-technical person. Versus something like patchworking an old system and trying to make it work in a new one. I already saw that it wasn't working well with Sage. I'm sure other companies have addressed that better than Sage. Not Sage. Their product Sage 100 was, did not work in a modern system. So that was appealing. There's a lot of security. Like I wanted easy access and big security. So those are like obviously two things that don't necessarily work together. I travel to our factories in China, our distribution center in Europe, or we have a factory in Switzerland, factory in Canada. There's a lot of traveling. So I needed to be able to log into the system when I'm traveling. I need the people that work at those places to work. I need to know that the system is going to be up and supported 24/7 because we are almost a 24/7 operation. I have very specific manufacturing needs. So I started talking to all of our companies. What do you want? What do you need? What do you want? What does the current ERP system not give? What do you want to have from it? And I started coming up with a list. This is what we need from an ERP system. And from there, it was pretty quick to get rid of most options. Because as I went through our list of needs, some of them even, like NetSuite, I can remember specifically like, oh yeah, that's going to require customization. So that was like a no-go for me. Like I'm not ignorant. I know we're going to need customizations. We've had customizations right off the bat. But when the conversation on some basic things start out with, that's a customization, all right, you're off the table. So that was a big piece. So that was kind of like the more technical pieces of what I was looking at. And then also pricing, right? Like that at the end of the day, that's what's going to make you say yes or no to a product. Acumatica's pricing structure that is usage, not user-based, was very appealing to me because that was a project I didn't even want to go through. I didn't want to. Some of these companies were like, well, tell us how many finance users you're going to have, how many of this type of user, how many of this. I was like, I don't know. Like the CFO wants to use all of it. I got to get them 3 licenses with one of the companies like this. That's crazy. Yeah. But that's the way they were set up. And then I find out Acumatica, they're just like, no, unlimited users. That's awesome. Because then because we are in a growth period, we've acquired companies since moving to Acumatica, and I don't want that to become part of the negotiations. Like, oh, if we bring you on, we have to add 10 employees. That's going to be an extra $100 a month, $200, whatever. I didn't want to have to worry about per user. If we use the system more, then that's understandable. But to add like 3 people, I don't think it should cost me more. So
especially if they're running reports or they're just accessing information, they're not even doing heavy transactions,
or just entering move transactions through the production workflow. I don't want to think about paying for that person to just do my business processes. A lot of the systems felt very transactional that way, where Acumatica's consumption based pricing was really, really, really appealing. To just make my life a little easier, to be honest, because it was another project to just figure out what pricing would be with some of these companies.
Yeah.
So eventually, I got to Microsoft and Acumatica, just to be specific about what the 2 that I was looking at.
Was it Business Central or Microsoft Business Central or
Business Central? Yeah.
Okay.
And then it became okay. Well, they both they kind of checked all the boxes of things. There was a couple customizations I was going to have to do on both sides right off the bat, regardless. And like if we want to plug into Shopify, that I don't think anyone's doing that natively. So there's still things you're going to have to do with customizations and plugging in, but it was nothing no like key functions that were.
You're not going in and changing the code. You're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, so we got to the point to where I kind of had to make a gut decision because it was ultimately my decision. Now, I did reach out to all of the relevant people throughout the world of our company. What do you need? What do you want? Then I did the work myself to vet my top choice. I didn't want to have 50 people, 10 people, 5 people make the decision together, because that would have made it take like another year. Right. I said, I'm going to do the work to say what I think is the best choice. Then we're going to present it to each company, and you all have the ability to tell me no, but you have to tell me why. So that was my my plan. That was the way I wanted to attack this. So I got to Business Central and I got to Acumatica, and then pricing. Obviously, that was a piece of it. I really liked Acumatica's pricing structure too. But then our VAR, our ERP person that was working with us to tell us sell us on the product and be our support company through the transition. He said something I think that was really key to me, and just from his perspective, he had worked with Microsoft a lot. He had worked with Acumatica a lot. He said Acumatica, just at least for now, I hope it stays the same, but at least for now, they're a singular focused company. Everyone at the company has one job to make Acumatica better.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you on a program that uses probably 50 different Microsoft products, and their ERP system is just one of them. So support isn't the same when you're going to reach out to Microsoft support versus Acumatica support, or the focus of Acumatica to build this product up. I can't feel guaranteed that Microsoft is going to always look at their ERP system as like the thing to focus on most. And then also just using the products, like demoing them, seeing them. Acumatica just felt more intuitive. It felt very easy to look at and use, and it felt like it would be less of a lift to transition all of the legacy users and new users to Acumatica versus Microsoft, at least the way I thought of it. Yeah. So I said, all right, let's go with Acumatica. Now, everyone else, tell me if there's anything that's a no-go here. And I went with marketing. I went with all divisions of the company, like the corporate part structure of the company, marketing, because we do use the CRM, pieces of the CRM, finance, operations, customer service, production, distribution, warehouse management, all of the systems that we need, and the leads of those systems. Everyone else, check it and tell me no. And if you want to tell me no, tell me why. No one told me no. So that's why we chose Acumatica.
Not a single group, huh? Because
to be completely fair and honest, the marketing piece, the CRM, isn't that robust. It is kind of designed to work alongside other things, but it does give us the ability to link a contact in an outside marketing product to the contact in Acumatica, which this is huge for us. It's a huge change. I can link that to actual dollar sales in Acumatica. So even though we don't sell direct, I'll get into a specific thing that we created that's awesome. I have a way to capture all the school teachers that our dealers are selling to directly and tie that to dollars within our system. So that's that type of thing that's really, really, really valuable for us. So it's still valuable, but it's not, they weren't like, oh, this is amazing. They're like, I guess we could work with this. But they understood what it was going to, equate to.
Yeah. Yeah. The integration to the entire operations is a big deal for sure. Yeah. Well, I want to come back. You unfortunately, you answered one question. Now you've created 10 more questions in my head. So I'll come back, and I've got a question for you too, Sanket, here in just a moment. But first, I want to turn to the audience real quickly and just thank everyone who's joining here today and commenting on where they're joining from. Darian's joining on LinkedIn. Good morning. Hemant on LinkedIn. Good morning as well. We have Jerome joining from South Africa. Thank you for being here today, Jerome. We've got Samantha. Samantha joining from Ontario. Go Sanket and Acumatica. I'm guessing she works for Acumatica.
No,
super fan.
She works for a partner. I know Samantha. Okay. Hey, Samantha. Yeah.
Good to see you. Samantha's a pianist. Okay, and that I tried to play piano once and it was a disaster. So I admire people who learn how to play piano. Alec joining from Bellevue, Washington, used to play the trumpet. So thanks for being here. Min from Vietnam loves bass guitar. We've got a rhythm section forming here with you.
Yes, we do.
Varun joining from Techmatic Systems in Delaware in India. We have Baham joining from Toronto. Thanks for being here. And then, I'm sorry, I didn't say that name right. Benam, I guess it is. Benam says customization is Acumatica's strength point, which makes the system stand out. So thank you for that feedback there. Rahim, good morning to all. Thanks for being here today. And yeah, I think we've, and then here's a comment here from Yuri. I hope it is, on LinkedIn. Says interesting point about support. As someone who used Microsoft support, I can testify to each word. So thanks everyone for joining here today and commenting where you're at. If you have any questions for the audience or for the guests here today, please feel free to drop those in the chat. We'll pull from those questions here in a moment. But I want to shift gears, and I've got a bunch of follow-up for you, Ralph, on what you just said. Right? But I want to ask Sanket a question here too. But when you look at companies like Eastman Music, not Eastman Kodak, but Eastman Music, Sanket, I want to share a couple stats here that Ralph shared with you and I yesterday. 200 active users worldwide, roughly, and 1,400 employees. So this isn't, I don't know if you mentioned that before, Ralph. If you did, I missed it, but you have 1,400 employees. So you're not a tiny little mom and pop operation. I mean, you're a good mid-size, solid mid-size company right in the middle, big enough that you could have probably gone with a Microsoft, maybe even like an Oracle or, a NetSuite or whatever. But not so small that, you needed something that could scale. Right. And so, that's what I find interesting is we're not talking about a tiny little operation here. So from your perspective, Sanket, what makes Acumatica stand out for small and mid-sized businesses like Eastman?
Yeah. So I think a couple things come out. So number one, I think, and Ralph talked about this, just because you're small and mid-sized doesn't mean that you have simple needs. So if you think about Eastman Music, what Ralph talked about is they've got manufacturing centers around the world. They've got distribution centers around the world. They've got customers everywhere. They make their own product. They sell other third branded products. They do it online. They have various methods associated. This is not a simple business. But Ralph also talked about this is, he doesn't have an IT team. And so when you think about software and technology to support the business, especially for companies of this size, you have this sort of traditional make versus buy decision. And if you're an enterprise that's, a $10 billion revenue business with a, 300 person IT team, and you can have 50 developers on staff all the time, maybe the decision to make something for your business makes sense. But for other companies that don't have those resources, it's a buy decision. And what you want to do is you want to buy the software and the technology that meets your needs. And understands the complexity of the business. And so what I think Acumatica does, and given our focus on having broad capability of business processes all the way from procurement to customer success, Ralph talked about it, right? He's like, the marketing team is involved with Acumatica, the shipping team, the operations, manufacturing, et cetera, all obviously finance, all of these different parts of the company are touching Acumatica. And that's sort of part of how we operate. We want all of these business processes that cross all those departments so they can get value out of the information that an ERP can give. And I think that's pretty unique for Acumatica that we do that for a lot of our customers. Acumatica will be one of the most important pieces of software that they use. It's the system of record for their customers, their products, all the things that are going on. And, it'll connect to other systems, but that's an important part of their investment in terms of how they manage their business. And I think that's critical that we have that functionality all in one piece of software, and that we do 2 releases every year. So every 6 months, it's getting better and continuing to add more functionality for the customers. I think those are the key things that we focus on.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Thanks for that. And want to also say hello to a few other guests here. Lagos, Nigeria. Opayemi's joining from there. Werner joining from Germany. Thank you for being here today. And then Irina joining from Seattle, and she's also a pianist. People really bring back these PTSD moments of me trying to learn piano. It just really rubbing it in my face here today. Now I'm gonna have to go learn. I'm gonna have to put it on my bucket list to make sure I learn. So I guess coming back to you, Ralph, what were some of the biggest lessons? So you're an ops guy, you're not an IT guy. You have your own your sort of outsourced IT that supports you. You're coming at this from a person that never knew, you didn't know what Acumatica was. You didn't have any ERP or real IT experience, it sounds like. And now all of a sudden you're in charge of leading this initiative within Eastman Music. What were some of the biggest lessons you learned along the way so far?
So, I mean, I don't have IT background, but I did have like some data understanding because of having to use something called Solver, a plugin to pull out data from Sage. so that we could get some type of customized consolidated reports using Excel as an interface. So that was that helped me a lot, because I did have at least an understanding of like how to connect the dots between data tables. I didn't know actual SQL join language and stuff like that, but I understood that. I just understood conceptually what was going on in the background. But that product gave me the ability to have an interface that I could use to start doing some reporting. So I have done a lot of reporting based off of my ability to learn Excel and some plugins from Sage. But now transitioning to Acumatica, a big piece, some of the things I learned was, having a singleized system where everything can be housed, where every company could use the same chart of accounts. Like what I learned was just how freeing it was to move from siloed companies to just one system, where I have one account in the US. Some of our major accounts would have huge balances in Sage with each company. And it's so hard to manage their credit limit when it's on three separate companies. Now in Acumatica, I was like, I could see their credit limit across all the companies that they purchased from. So just like a kind of like a awakening, or like a nice learning path for me, was just understanding how nice it is to have everything in the same bucket instead of siloed so much. But what I also learned on Acumatica, and something I wish I had learned more about, very specifically, I'm sure other ERP systems have something similarly. In Sage, it was basically a customization to have to do this. But the concept in Acumatica has something called attributes, where I could tag product or anything that fits within a class, a customer, vendors. Aside from the classes, which is Acumatica does things, I could add attributes to so many things. And that really, really opened up our ability to manage the complexity of our business. I don't want to create a separate item class for each brand that we sell. So I just made that be an attribute. Now I have amazing reports that show me brand sales across item classes. I could look at clarinet sales. I could look at woodwind sales. I could look at student woodwind sales. I could look at all student sales. I could look at Eastman Company student sales. So moving to Acumatica gave me this ability to slice and dice our data in so many more creative ways than we were ever able to do in the past. Everything was me dumping data out and using my brain to know what item codes live within a brand and separate that out. So much manual tribal knowledge that I had to have. So now moving to Acumatica, we've been able to add 3 positions that are in support of the data out of Acumatica. I have a reporting engineer, a product data specialist, and someone who specializes in consulting with our manufacturing companies. As she's an employee, but she basically is like the company consultant for manufacturing processes. So that was a really fun part of the journey. The painful part, I think, doesn't go away from anyone, and that's just figuring out all the mappings that are necessary to pull your old information into the new information. But my suggestion on that, you're not asking, but I'll probably answer a question you're going to ask. My suggestion on that is really don't just do a one-to-one mapping from, it was this in the old system, now it's going to be this. It was this in the old system, now it's going to be this. Don't one-to-one map stuff. Figure out the structure you want on the other end, on the new system, and then get the 20 things that may fill into one over here, or one thing that fills into 20 over here. Really think of, we vastly simplified our chart of accounts moving to Acumatica, because there was a lot of things that we had to separate in Sage, because that was the vehicle to separate the data. Where Acumatica, there's probably 4 different ways to separate the data. So we didn't need to stuff everything. We didn't need to pick everything into its own little GL. So we went from like, I can't say for sure, but dozens of sales GLs to like 5 for our main products, because it's so easy for us. Because the CFO wants to see the margin. Okay, well, we could do that by item class. We could do that by attribute. We have other ways that we've done that. So he doesn't need to use the sales and COGS GL to look at the margin for every different product. We could just slice the data out that way for him. So we've simplified so many things. So that's like the lesson that we learned, and also something I think we did pretty well, is just don't try and recreate your old ERP system processes. Look and analyze what you think you would want to have set up in the new system, and then make everything translate into that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I mean, first of all, most organizations as it is underestimate data migration as a whole, just cleaning up what you already have. But then you bring up a really good point, is it's not as simple as saying, okay, now I've cleaned it up, now I'm just going to move it over. It's figuring out how exactly it's going to look in this environment, and asking the tough questions like, why is our GLMS? Do we want to just replicate that in Acumatica, our new ERP system, or do we want to use this as an opportunity to clean that up? And that takes time, and a lot of organizations don't think about that in time to make it happen. I'm here with Ralph and Sanket. We're here talking about a real-life case study involving Acumatica ERP. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in darker, walk around the neighborhood. Feeling blessed.
I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent, technology-agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Feeling good, like I should. When in darker, walk around the neighborhood. Feeling blessed, never stressed. Got that sunshine on my.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 242. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. Thanks for being here. And we're here in the midst of a conversation with Ralph and Sanket talking about an actual real-life Acumatica ERP implementation. Just from the audience, if you had ever heard of Acumatica prior to this conversation, I'm just curious. If you have, let me know what you think about it. If you haven't, I just would be curious to know. And by the way, just as a side note, I've got a follow-up question for you here, Sanket, here in just a moment. But before I do that, I'm going to put up a QR code. If you want to learn more about Acumatica, we are not affiliated with Acumatica, but I did want to share some information about them. So if you scan this QR code, we'll include a link below too. Scan that QR code. It'll take you to where you can learn more about Acumatica. If you're just doing some research, you want to learn more about it, read some of the case studies and white papers and all the good stuff they have on their website. You can check it out there. So if you try that too, you can also get a 15% discount on your subscription if you do end up deciding at some point to buy the software. So use that QR code to learn more, and you can also get a demo and do all that good stuff there. So I'll leave that up for a moment. But in the meantime, I have another question for you, Sanket. So Ralph was just talking about data mapping and data migration. And I know you often emphasize data readiness. Can you explain from your perspective, more from the vendor perspective, why is it such a critical foundation for ERP success?
Yeah. So the sort of way I like to start about talking about data readiness, especially from an ERP perspective, is to think of a business and the data as the digital twin. Sort of the easiest way to think about it. And a lot of our customers, their businesses are in the physical world. They're a manufacturer, they're a distributor, they're in construction, they're moving something physical. And when I talk to some of our customers, I ask them, imagine for a moment if you had a digital twin of your business. And all of that, like almost like the Matrix, right? Like not that we're trying to create the Matrix, but just imagine, you can imagine if your business was a twin and you had all of that stuff digitized. And if you had all of your employees who have all this great information about what's happening with customers or partners or the business or the products, have access to all of that digital twin, a complete replica of the business in a digital sense, with its relationships, with its status, with the vectors of where things are moving. Imagine the speed of decision making, the impact of that decision, and how much more competitive you would be. Right, because every business is trying to be competitive, figure out what's going on. The world is not standing still on all these different dimensions. So you've got to figure out, what are we going to do to continue to move forward? And every business every day wakes up thinking about that, right? And so that's how I sort of broadly think of it, is sort of what's that digital twin. And so from an ERP perspective, I feel like Acumatica plays a very, very big role in creating that digital twin view of a business. We have product information, SKU information, inventory, manufacturing processes, employees, customers, partners, all this data that's in there. And it's all available real time on any screen. And so you could sort of look at this and say, hey, that's a really interesting way to think about it. But obviously, the information of that digital twin is only as good as the data that's in there and the relationships between that data. And so that's a critical part of the data readiness portion, right? And Ralph did, I think, a really nice job of talking about the chart of accounts and the mappings and the different ways and how to use attributes. It's not just having the data, which is, binary pieces of information. It's the relationships of those. It's the tags that you put on them. And it's how then you build the business processes so that you get information of that data, that you can actually do something with it. Because the other thing is, if you do have a digital twin of your business, you'll probably be overwhelmed with all of that data. And so you want to make sure that you have a sophisticated approach to making value out of the data. So that's one piece of it. The second piece of it, and we probably can't go without saying the two most famous letters of today's technology world, AI, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence in particular is taking lots of data and taking patterns and then figuring out what to do with it, right? Whether it's in machine learning, whether it's, large language models that, we use for these chatbots that many of us use probably on a daily basis now. That's all formed by the core data that's in the system. And so the unlocking of new capabilities also requires really, really strong data readiness to be able to take advantage of. So I think there's a historical part, which is that digital twin, and then it's the go forward capabilities that artificial intelligence will give employees how to take advantage of that data.
Yeah, good stuff. And it's one of those things, a necessary evil in these projects, right? Because you can get all caught up in the cool bells and whistles of the technology itself, of the software application itself. And I know, Ralph, you mentioned that Acumatica was just, for you guys, it was easier to use, it looked nicer, easier to navigate. But if that system doesn't have good data behind it, it doesn't matter how good it looks or how well it works on the surface. So here's a couple questions I want to get to here from the audience. First of all, I'll say hello to Fatima, joining from Egypt. But here's a question. I think this is probably more for you, Sanket, about, this is from Sanjay on LinkedIn. Sanjay says, do you think operational inefficiencies and issues of legacy systems is helping more companies modernize their ERP systems? Are you seeing, like, from your vendor perspective, are you seeing more organizations that are saying, hey, we've got all these operational inefficiencies, these legacy systems are hamstringing us? I know Ralph painted a good picture of what he was experiencing with Mass 90 and why they decided to go on this modernization journey. Is that typically the impetus or the driver, or what are the biggest drivers for someone wanting to swap out their ERP system?
Yeah, I think it's three things, at the very broadest level. Number one, when I talk to customers that are moving from legacy into a modern ERP, the first thing will be, in some cases there's a change in ownership, or it's a family business and, younger folks are coming into the business. And the first question is, why can't I get all this data on my phone? Right. And, try getting legacy ERP data on your phone. Or why can't I approve this purchase order? Or why can't I see what the shipments are today? Or why can't I get a daily balance sheet or P&L statement or cash? Can't do that in an old system. And so very simply, folks who've been, spent most of their time on a phone or moving around, as Ralph started traveling, going to figure stuff out, the requirements become like, hey, you can't meet my requirements of what I need to do my job. And so this system is holding me back. So that tends to be one thing. The second thing is the customer requirements. Customers are like, I want to know, what I'm ordering, what the price is, when it's going to come. I want transparency through the whole system. And a lot of those legacy systems can't do that. They can connect to stuff, but they can't provide real-time access and information, because it's probably sitting on someone's PC and maybe it's off. It's not working, or it's a server that's behind some firewall you can't get access to. And so those are just simple requirements. And if you're not able to do that, you're not able to compete, you're going to probably be left behind. And then the last thing Ralph was talking about, he wanted, a system that could access anywhere, but also had big security. That's another thing. We've seen a number of customers recently come to us using legacy systems where all of their data was held hostage by hackers. And, people think, oh, I've got my system, behind in my basement somewhere in my warehouse. Yeah, that's probably the easiest thing to hack. And so, that we've seen people get their businesses completely shut down because they aren't in a fully compliant, secure environment with all the security elements that you need. And you need people paying attention daily because the vectors of security are growing every day. And if you're not smart on that, you're going to have problems. And so you need to make sure that whoever you're getting your software from is thinking about that and helping protect, the company's data. So I think those are three things that we see very commonly as compelling events for people to move on to new tech.
Yeah, and as you were describing your situation, Ralph, your legacy situation, it reminded me of a common theme I've been thinking about lately when it comes to user adoption. That is when you start looking at entry level employees, especially if they're younger, 25, 30-year-old people that grew up with social media. And to your point, Sanket, it was on their phones. You try to imagine a world where they're going to come into your company now and you're going to teach them Mass 90, or you're going to teach them like an old green screen system, and they're just not going to have any idea what, you can't even comprehend it. It doesn't make sense. For me, it does, because I grew up, when I came up in the tech world, that's what, I saw green screens. I knew what a transaction code was. I knew how it works, but no offense to the younger people, but they just didn't need to grow up in that environment. And so as we age as a society, you're going to have more and more of those kids, and soon they won't be kids, obviously, but they'll be older like us, and they'll not even know how to use these sorts of systems. So that learning curve, I imagine, is pretty important especially if you have attrition or you're bringing in new people, entry-level people. You're going to need something that's easy to grow with like that.
No, we've seen a big difference in like the new hires, especially the younger new hires. The training is much, much faster. We would take 4 or 5 weeks to feel comfortable with a new CSR in our old system. We're now about a week. And we had better tools and processes, but it's just so much more natural to them. Like something sometimes when someone annoys me, I was like, you don't need instructions to use Facebook. Click around and figure it out. Because you can for Acumatica, right? Like Sage, I needed to have like some documented click here, and click here. Acumatica is not 100% intuitive like Facebook, but kind of, some of it is. So like, that was a huge change for us being on a modern user interfaces, because you don't need an instruction manual again for social media accounts. I never had to look at how to use Amazon. You don't really have to do that on Acumatica. You have to get trained on what the heck you're seeing on the screen, but to get to the screens, it doesn't take anywhere near the same level of training.
Yeah. That's very true. I mean, even your phone, you get a new phone. Yeah. It's not like I don't even know I don't think I got a manual. I don't think they give you a manual. You just turn it on, you just start using it. And there's always stuff you're like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. That's cool. But you learn it over time, and use a company and use a team can build that, what you want them to learn and what you want to make sure they know about the system. But it's not because it's not intuitive. It's just you want to show them some of the features and that sort of thing. That's a different learning curve for sure than just trying to figure out the basics, and that being difficult. Yeah. So here's a question for you, Ralph, on LinkedIn. This is from Darian. If you had to do the migration again, what would you do earlier in the process to avoid pain later? So like if you could just sort of resequence the way you went about rolling out Acumatica, was there anything you would say, if I could go back and do that differently, I would?
It could be because of my own ignorance of having just done it for Eastman, but I think we've been pretty successful getting that many companies switched over in 3 years. And it's kind of phased, like some companies move over their sales and finance first, but then, manufacturing doesn't come over until later, so there's different ways that we did different companies. I think what I would change management of your existing employees is such a huge piece of changing to an ERP system. So I would say, if anything, just setting expectations to my employees even more than I did. I said, this is going to be tough. This is going to be difficult. Human nature. I gave you guys the training modules. You didn't do them. Don't come. There's a little friction that happens when you switch over, for sure. But being even more upfront with the sales staff and the customers, certain parts of the business are a little less good at doing the trainings and not showing up on day one and going, where'd all my buttons go? So talking to those departments more before and saying, look, it's really going to be bad for probably months. You're going to be completely behind. Everything that you do intuitively is gone. So you really need to be ready to start clicking buttons and learning what this stuff does. I can't show you what everything does on every screen before day one. You're going to have to be willing to learn a new system and do some of it on your own, because we're going to be trying to figure out how to get our first shipments out. I don't care about your sales goal today. We'll get it back up. We'll build everything back up. One thing that we did is I did not, in the same way we didn't want to recreate our old system with data, I didn't want to create our old reporting. So I did very little, very, very, very little report customization before we started, because I didn't want to just recreate what we had in the past. I said, click the buttons in the system. If you get to the point where you say, I can't figure out how to do something, you need to tell me first what you did, what reports you tried, what inquiries you tried in Acumatica before I'm going to even help you. Not the finance side. Those guys need help, right? Like, we definitely need our, we got all of our financial reports done, our P&L and our balance sheets and things like that. But as far as like, what are the sales in my territory? Figure it out. And then because then I get a list of the gaps. Okay, now we could build out some inquiries. And so within 2 months, 3 months, we had a lot of things that we were able to go back to our partner, Integrated System Solutions, and hey, Troy, I need some reports done. So can you start working on some of these things? Yeah, okay. Here's the gaps. But that way I wasn't just giving them a laundry list of this is everything that's broken now. So kind of answering the question, but also kind of not. It's not just what I would do before. Also, what I would do differently during the initial launch is really having people understand this is going to be painful, but we'll get past it. And if we're just we're systematic about it, we don't freak out, we don't act like the sky's falling, we come up with a list of common things that are missing, we could get those replaced relatively quickly. And we did. It's just people were a lot. It was also after COVID, the supply chain issues with COVID, because this was at the end of 2022. So we were dealing with that. We were dealing crazy amounts of product finally coming through the long line of containers. So we had multiple things going on at the time to make it difficult. But there's never going to be a good time. Just do it. It's really ripping the Band-Aid off. I just really want people to understand we're really ripping the Band-Aid off. And if you didn't do your homework, it's going to be painful for you, but we'll get through it.
Yeah, and I think it's also important. That's a great point. It's a great way to look at it. And I think another lesson for those listening that might be about to embark on a similar journey is not only is it painful, but that it's normal to be painful. I think that's the other thing. Is it's like, hey, this isn't painful just because I'm screwing everything up and I'm trying to make it painful for you. So get ready. It's more, these projects are just difficult. I mean, they aren't easy. We're going to we're going to try and make it less difficult, and we're doing all the things we can to mitigate risk and to make adoption easier and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, they just are difficult. We're going through a big change, especially for a company that's grown as much as you have. And like you said, you had other fish to fry at the same time. You're trying to implement new technology, which is true for most organizations too. Yeah. So here's a question from the audience I want to ask you, Sanket. This is from, it sounds like someone who's in the Acumatica ecosystem. This is from Rahim. Rahim says, I'm new to Acumatica and curious about its real world applications. Could you share which industries are currently leveraging Acumatica and how it might be relevant for someone working in the pharmaceutical sector? So maybe you could talk a little bit just about what industries do you see most commonly with Acumatica, or what industries are most likely to want to gravitate towards Acumatica?
Yeah, so we have a number of different, we have products and we have industry editions associated with our products, which have a collection of modules that are pre-configured and operate for specific industries. And that's all in one singular code base. You can actually turn modules on and off in order to meet the needs of the specific industries that you're in based on the modules that you might need. So our packages include distribution, manufacturing, construction, retail, and professional services. So those are the 5 different industry edition packages that we operate in. And, it's in terms of the pharmaceutical industry, our manufacturing edition primarily focuses out of the box with discrete manufacturing and so we work really well with medical device companies and those kind of things. But to answer the other question, we do actually have a partner of ours that's built a process manufacturing module that sits on top of Acumatica that can support pharmaceutical companies. So we do have some pharmaceutical customers that are out there that are, building different drugs and all different elements, but that relates to a third-party module that actually connects to Acumatica for those requirements.
Is that common in the Acumatica space to have the third-party developers or vendors that are creating, variations or modules for Acumatica?
We do. We actually, what's really nice is that a lot of, like, if I just take manufacturing, for example, in manufacturing, even in discrete, we have a number of partners out there that have built modules that sit on top of Acumatica that are on our code base and actually integrate sort of natively with the product for very specific industries. So like we have, a partner that does stuff for just folks who operate in the garage door industry. We have folks who have built modules that's important for automotive manufacturers, people who make modules for automotive companies. We have others that are focused in cannabis, right? So there's all these different areas, and they've taken the base platform of Acumatica, they use our SDK that's broadly available, and then they build these modules on top for what I would call verticals inside of those industries. So if you take manufacturing, there's hundreds of sub verticals inside of those. And many of our partners have built specific modules that sits on top of Acumatica to fill that last mile gap of the functionality that's required.
Yeah, very cool. Actually, I didn't realize that about Acumatica, so that's good to know. And so you depending on what industry or functional need you have, there's different variations that still use the core product the way it was built out of the box, but you're extending it or applying it to a different use case depending on the industry or function.
That's right.
Yeah, even I mean, we don't have anything that for the manufacturing side, but we use the Shopify integration, and it's pretty seamless. It's really seamless.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that's the other part. Not only do we do that, but then we also have these integrations with third-party systems. So whether it's Shopify or BigCommerce or Amazon, or there's other that's on the retail side. There's others that we do in different parts of functionality. A lot of our customers need those other pieces, so we provide that as well.
Yeah, very good. So Ralph, so far I know it's early in your post implementation journey, and it's an ongoing journey, of course. But what sorts of business value, business benefits have you seen since you've started using Acumatica?
I mean, I think I'm correct in saying the ERP systems are initially based off of financials, right? So like it's Sanket. I like your twin idea. The analogy I use is virtual versus physical. Talking to the warehouse people, you're doing virtual. You got to make the virtual match the physical. So if you move a box, move the box in the system as well, right? Like you need to do that
exactly,
or else the data's wrong. So everything. This is what helped me through my journey personally. Going back to a question that was earlier, and then to get to your question now, Eric, is I learned a lot more about finance. I really am a saxophone player. I didn't go to accounting school. I don't always remember if it's credit or a debit, depending on what type of transaction it is, but I understand the concept, right? I understand what GLs are, and I understand how a balance sheet and a P&L or a statement work. So learning that type of thing really helped me get to a point to where I was able to then take all the processes in Acumatica and figure out, okay, how does that relate to accounting? How does that relate to accounting? How does that relate to accounting? So by doing all that work, I was able to, oh my goodness, what was the question?
The business value or the business.
We went on a tangent. Right. So the business value. So it's all to our finance team. So really the one piece of our business that is the most global is our finance team. So I have 6 or 7 accounting people that manage all the accounting for the world. We do have separate in China. We do have a little bit different in Europe, but we are able to centralize a lot of our more big picture business processes, accounting being a huge one, right? And then I mentioned earlier, I've added a product data specialist. So we do have 3 different tenants. So I have to keep 3 different sets of records of items updated, but it's pretty easy when we could basically copy and paste the information from one to the other and add attributes. So there are bigger pieces that I'm able to add as a global support for all these other companies rather than them having to do it themselves. You guys got a new product line launch? Great. Give us the data. We'll get it updated in the system. We could add attributes, and now it just plug and play to our existing generic inquiries. That's the report writing, the inquiry tool for Acumatica, the basic reporting tool that we have. So we could write generic inquiries, and now we get a new company, we start a new product line, whatever it is, it just plug and play into the existing structure that we already have. That it doesn't feel like I'm having to reinvent the wheel every time something new comes up. We just ingest it and let it fit within the ecosystem that we've been able to create. So I have a product data specialist, I have a reporting engineer, as I mentioned earlier. So this guy can help everyone in the company because we have one singular program and it's all built on the same structure. We've structured our data to fit within Acumatica's structure. So it's very easy for us to have anyone in the world reach out to him. Hey, I really need something that does this. Oh yeah, I already have that for this company. Let me just copy and paste the data, change a couple of parameters and conditions. There you go. Now you have it. So that's been a huge, huge benefit for us, for the ability to kind of centrally manage the tools that everyone needs to use. We're not like dictating how they use it. We're just saying, all right, here's the tools you guys have. You tell us what you're missing and we'll create it for you. So right. For me and my team to be able to do that globally is huge.
Yeah, very cool. Well, that's good. It's impressive. You're already seeing value and benefits. I'm sure over time you'll continue to optimize and figure out better ways to continue using some of the new features and functions, especially as they release new features and functions to you. So I guess I'll leave the final word to you, Sanket, or the final question I have for you here today, which is, looking ahead, where do you see ERP going, especially with AI, predictive analytics, all that stuff? Where do you see ERP headed as it relates to the mid-market here where you guys play?
Yeah, I think it's a broad piece. I'll just sort of share where I think are the 3 places we're investing in, because I think those become important elements. I think number 1, Ralph talked about this usability. At the end of the day, if the tool is not usable, people can't get to what they need to do their jobs. What's the point? So we're continuing to invest in usability, make things easier to find, get the right information to take action. That's number 1. Number 2 is continuing to improve and increase the business process functionality. So we look really carefully, like, do we have in the box all the things that all our customers need, depending upon what industry they're in? And so we're continuing to invest in that on a regular basis. And then third is definitely the artificial intelligence piece. And I think there's a couple dimensions to this. One is, augmenting the capabilities for humans to do their job. So one person can do a lot more work. And then the second is, how much can the system do by itself, so that a human doesn't need to be involved. And at the end of the day, that's all just about productivity. And so I think a lot of different elements in terms of advisors or agents that can automate stuff and make things better for people is sort of where we're investing, while we obviously keep all of our customers' data absolutely secure. That's the number 1 requirement. So those are the 3 things we're investing in.
All right. Thank you guys both for being here. Really appreciate it. Always love learning from actual end clients and talking to the vendors as well to see what they see for the future of ERP. But a great real life case study. We've got a lot more to cover, including a discussion around a huge project management mistake that you're probably making on your project right now, and you may not even know it. So be sure to stick around. We're going to cover that and more after a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
How can you see into my eyes like open doors?
I'm excited to announce the release of our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's available now on the Third Stage Consulting website, www.thirdstage-consulting.com. This report gives you an unbiased, technology-agnostic insight to help you optimize your organization's projects for success. Get your copy today using the QR code in front of me or on our website.
I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management, or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you, or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Hello and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 242. My name is Eric Kimberly, and here with Darian Chwialkowski. And Darian, we just had Ralph and Sanket on the show talking about a real recent ERP implementation. In fact, it's an implementation that's still ongoing. It involves Acumatica ERP. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, such a great conversation overall. It's always nice to hear a real case study when you're talking about a vendor and seeing somebody's real experience with that. But just a couple follow-up general questions from that conversation for you, Eric. When a mid-market company is thinking about a digital transformation, what should they be evaluating beyond just software features?
Yeah, well, I think Ralph had some interesting points and perspectives on that. I like how he, in his example, focused on the usability of the system and just the overall ease of use and the ability to train people and get people to adapt the system. He talked about that gut feel, how he had to go with his gut at some point. And I think part of it was based on some of the intangible aspects that you're asking about. So I think usability is one. He talked about pricing, which I think is another one. One thing he didn't mention that I was thinking about, but it didn't come up in his response, but it is something that triggered a thought in my mind, is when he was talking about the pricing and how the pricing model was so different. They didn't feel like they would get nickeled and dimed every time they wanted to add a new user or go acquire another company. I was also thinking about the culture of the vendor, because a lot of that is not only is it the pricing itself that's advantageous, it's the fact that you're working with a vendor that wants to be a true partner. And in this day and age of ERP vendors that are, just doing shady stuff, like we talked earlier in the segment or early in this episode about SAP and some of the antitrust allegations that they're facing right now, you want to work with someone that is just a good partner. They're not just providing a good product, but you're going to get the support you need. You're going to get the attention you need. You're going to be an important client to them. I think if Eastman Music would have gone and implemented SAP or Oracle Fusion or even Microsoft Business Central, Oracle NetSuite, I think if they would have gone and implemented some of those other better known systems that are out there, they probably wouldn't have gotten the same attention they deserved. And, how do you quantify that? You don't. You can't quantify that. It's not going to show up in your RFP response, comparison ranking or whatever. But it is something you've got to think about, especially if you've got two vendors that the products are very comparable. Then you have to start slicing hairs a little bit and start looking at, well, what's going to separate one from the other? And it may come down to things like culture. It may come down to general usability of the system. It may come down to pricing. It may come down to some of these different things that have nothing to do with features and functions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's super interesting. And what risks do mid-market companies then often underestimate in these digital transformations?
Well, I think the user adoption and communication is one, and Ralph certainly alluded to that. That's very common that you hear companies say after the fact that they wish they would have spent more time on communicating and setting expectations and just getting everyone on the same page. Although I do like how it was interesting how he made it sound like he unilaterally made the decision to choose Acumatica, but he didn't really. He involved everyone in getting input on what they needed, and then he presented it to them and basically challenged them to tell them why this Acumatica solution would not work, and that seemed to be pretty effective. So I think, having said that, he did engage people, but then he talked about how he wished he would have spent more time just setting expectations up front. So it sounds like maybe he started by involving a lot of people, and then maybe he just didn't communicate as much as he wanted to later on, or at least not enough to be as effective as he thought he could be. So I think that is a good one. I think just being realistic about your implementation plan, because I think so many companies go into these with rose-colored glasses, assume that all is going to go great, and they plan accordingly. You don't want to plan for failure or plan for trouble, but you just have to plan for reality. And so I think that's another important one. That's why that phase 0 implementation planning piece of an implementation is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was a great conversation overall. Like I said, it's always nice to hear directly from a client with the vendor there.
Yeah, absolutely. That was good stuff. Yeah. And we want to shift gears a bit. And I know Ralph was, a first time ERP project manager by default or by, I don't know if he volunteered. I guess I should have asked him that. Did he volunteer to be the guy, or was he told he had to manage that project? Because it's not always common to have the VP of Ops be the person that's going to lead a project. But he was either way a project manager for the project, and so that leads us to a discussion of, well, what are the common project management mistakes that organizations often make and that project managers often make during their implementation. So I want to show you this clip of a video that we posted on YouTube recently, where I talk about the huge project management mistake that organizations are commonly making. So let's roll the clip and we'll come back and talk about it.
First, it helps to understand what is the difference between project leadership and project management. Project management talks a lot about how we're going to get things done. It's about milestones, it's about Gantt charts, it's about tracking budgets, tracking statuses, all that stuff, very important stuff. But project leadership doesn't focus on the how, it focuses on the why. Why are we doing what we're doing, and what are the major decisions that will ultimately affect the direction and outcome of the project? So we're not focused on the granular decision making at the project leadership level, we're focused on the why and making sure there's a clear connection between the execution of how we get things done and the overall strategy of the organization. So one way to think about it is project leadership is sort of the conduit between overall leadership and executive direction and the execution of your digital transformation. That gap is where project leadership steps in. Project leaders focus on connecting the dots, as I mentioned before, connecting the dots between the execution of the day-to-day project and the overall strategy and vision of the organization. It's really easy for strong project management to get off track, not because they're not good project managers, but because they don't have the right strategic guardrails in place to ensure that the project is supporting the bigger, longer-term vision and goals of the project. So project leadership focuses on the why we're doing the things we're doing on the project to support the project, whereas project management is more focused on the details of the tasks, of the statuses, and that sort of thing. So it's important to recognize those two differences in order to understand and make sure that you have both roles filled on your project. So this raises the question of why project leadership is so important in digital transformation, and why is it arguably more important than good project management? I mentioned before that even with good project management, you can still get off track, not because the governance and controls aren't in place, but because you're misaligned with the overall strategy of the organization. And that's one of the biggest roles of project leadership, is to ensure that the project stays in sync with the overall strategy. And not only that, but project leadership goes well beyond technology. A lot of times project management is more myopically focused on how to deploy pieces of technology and user training and things that are very granular in nature, whereas project leadership is more focused on how do we keep our stakeholders aligned? How do we ensure that we're organized the way we need to? What are our big rock types of decisions we need to make as it relates to standardizing or changing operations or roles and responsibilities? What are the major process improvements that we expect to see from this project? Those are the high-level guiding principles that will guide and ensure that the project stays on track, and that's why these two roles are very different and very important in different sorts of ways, and they need to stay in sync throughout the entire project. So what are the common warning signs that suggest that you might not have good enough project leadership? Well, one is if you don't have anyone other than your project manager managing the project. You could have an executive sponsor or an executive steering committee, but that isn't necessarily the same as a good project leader. You need someone that can make decisions on behalf of the organization and on behalf of the project team, and someone that can provide day-to-day guidance and direction to the overall project. And it's not safe to assume that a project manager can also do project leadership, because oftentimes those are two very different skill sets. Project managers involves PMP certifications and other types of training, whereas project leadership requires more of a business understanding and a higher EQ, to be candid. They need to be the people that can navigate disagreements and navigate the nuances and gray areas of projects, whereas project management is more focused on the black and white, either or sorts of functions within a project. So if you don't have both roles filled and clearly identified in your project, that's a big warning sign. Beyond that, if you start to see things like a disengaged leadership team, leadership's not involved in making decisions around operations or the way we're going to be organized in the future, that's another warning sign. If people are resisting change at a pretty widespread scale, that suggests you probably don't have strong enough project leadership. So those are just a few of the warning signs to watch for, but it's important to know that if you don't have both of these roles filled, you are going to have trouble during your implementation, and more trouble than the average implementation is going to have. So what is it we can do to ensure that we stay on track and that we provide the project leadership that the project needs? Well, first and probably most obviously is make sure you have a strong project leader. And again, that's probably a different person than just your project manager. That project leader is going to look beyond just what the project manager looks at. They're looking at the business, the organization, the operations, the business case, the value optimization, all that stuff is what a project leader does. Good project leadership involves looking at and investing in change management, making sure that user adoption, communications, change impacts, all that stuff is being addressed in parallel and as part of what the project manager focuses on. And another important sign of strong project leadership and something you want to do to fortify your project leadership.
So that was a clip about the huge project management mistake that you might be making right now, and you may not even know it. What were your thoughts and questions or takeaways from that, Darian?
Yeah, it was a great clip. I thought it played well into kind of everything we're talking about today when you are going through a digital transformation. A few things that really stood out, I guess, for me was the guardrails versus tasks. So like strong management without leadership risks delivering outputs that miss the bigger organizational goals. And leadership then provides that strategic guardrails that keep that project aligned. So with that, Eric, how do you help clients recognize the difference between project management and leadership early in the program? So that way those guardrails are in place from the start.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to teach, if I was teaching this to someone right now, right this moment, I would try to teach them one thing, and that is to not answer questions about project management and project progress and milestones and deliverables. I wouldn't assess or answer questions about the status of the project in any sort of binary definition. So in other words, I wouldn't say, did we or didn't we accomplish A, B, or C by this date? Because even if you say yes, I mean, if you say no, then it's obvious. You didn't, you're behind schedule, you missed a milestone, you missed a deliverable, whatever. But what more commonly happens is the misleading or the misperception that the answer is yes. So for example, I'll give you a quick example. If someone says, yes, we finished the first round of user acceptance testing, then my first question would be, okay, you say you finished it, but let's look at how many scenarios did you pan out? How much of your business day-to-day volume and day-to-day processes are covered in those scenarios? Did you cover all the exceptions? If not, why not? Just really trying to understand, is what you tested in this example, is what you tested fully aligned with what it is we want to accomplish and get out of this digital transformation? Because the software might be working. It might be that you went in, you did user acceptance testing, you followed a script, you entered the data, you got the output you expected, boom, we're done. But the problem is if you've got the wrong script, the wrong scenario, or incomplete scripts and scenarios, then you're going to have this misconception that we're done, we finished it, we can check the box and move on. But someone has to be there to assess the quality of, does it actually align with what you want your business to be and your general operations, all that good stuff. So just helping project managers become project leaders in that way, I think that's the big differentiator. Is you've got to think not just did I do it or not, it's did I do it well. And in fact, it's not even did I do it well, it's how well did I do it. It might be that, yes, I completed it, but we only covered 50% of the scenarios that we typically see in any given day of our business. Well, that would tell me then, yeah, you finished it, but you didn't do it right. You need to go back and do it again. So you didn't finish it, would be my conclusion there. And I think that art is really important, and it's super hard to see and teach unless you've been through these projects a number of times. If you haven't been through these projects a number of times and you're just more of a scientific tangible project manager that checks boxes and follows Gantt charts, you're going to create a misleading expectation that everything's green and healthy and on track, on time, on budget, but the quality sucks. And that's typically what happens. And so that'd be the biggest thing I'd teach, is just to know that nuance between yes and no, did it get done or not, and transition into more of thinking around, I don't need to know yes or no. I need to know, how well did we do this? What percentage, quality did we achieve this at?
Yeah, absolutely. But what a great episode today. Lots of good points in the conversation overall.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So thank you for joining today. Thank you to our guests, Ralph and Sanket, for being here today. Thank you to the audience for the great questions and for being here as always. You can find new episodes and go watch all the past episodes of the show, or listen to the past episodes at transformationgroundcontrol.com. We've got 241 past episodes that you may or may not have seen, so be sure to check that out when you get a chance. Lots of good content out there. So thanks again for being here today. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next week on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control. Take care.